Right, so left off with this mention of competition as the original basis on which the amendments to the Constitution were introduced. And George's perspective on this is like, oh, you want me to break the rules? Well, if I do that, we're just going to return to the dark ages where everybody was competing against everybody else. So actually, even despite his intelligence, he's very intelligent, which is why he has the radio transmitter. George is conditioned and actually agrees with the government's policy. So he's conditioned and brainwashed to such a degree that he won't even trust his own wife and break the rules. Okay, why? He says, well, if everybody starts cheating on the laws, you're going to get chaos. You're going to go back to intense competition. Now, why would, competition be such an extreme concern that people would accept such horrible restrictions on their freedoms and even their personal health and everything? And in the background, remember that usually these dystopian societies come out of some kind of post-apocalyptic or some kind of event that triggers a change in the society and set up the conditions on which the new society can be formulated, right? Something has to happen for something new to be introduced, which is an extreme restrictive kind of version of society. Like, I don't know, could be a global pandemic or something like that. It's the perfect condition in which to introduce something new. So we don't know exactly, the story doesn't exactly tell us, but one of the causes for massive competition amongst people could be something like overpopulation. Just to give an example, right? More and more people are crowding the earth, more and more competition, less and less resources, etc. So we don't know exactly in this particular story, but it's good to think about just there's some kind of backdrop here. Continuing on, the television program was suddenly interrupted for a news bulletin. It wasn't clear at first as to what the bulletin was about, since the announcer, like all announcers, had a serious speech impediment. For about half a minute, and in a state of high excitement, the announcer tried to say, "Ladies and gentlemen." He finally gave up, handed the bulletin to a ballerina to read. Okay, so again, we're in satire here. This is massive satire. Even the person whose job it is to be the best kind of speaker, the clearest speaker, a TV announcer, has a speech impediment. He's got a form of disability, which is the exact opposite of useful for his job. Okay? So this is mocking and ridiculing the idea of perfect equality, because what does this supposed perfect equality get you? It gets you the opposite of intelligent and useful. Its stupidity itself is on display. The guy can't even read the announcement. So he hands it to a ballerina. "That's all right," Hazel said of the announcer. "He tried. That's the big thing. He tried to do the best he could with what God gave him. He should get a nice raise for trying so hard." "Ladies and gentlemen," said the ballerina, reading the bulletin. She must have been extremely beautiful, because the mask she wore was hideous. And it was easy to see that she was the strongest and most graceful of all the dancers, for her handicap bags were as big as those worn by 200-pound men. So here we have the beauty handicap, which is hideous masks. And notice that the handicaps are proportional to natural inequalities. She's naturally super beautiful and super strong and graceful, so she's given bigger handicaps, a more ugly, hideous mask, in balance to the natural degree of her gifts or beauty, her natural qualities. Okay, so the handicaps, the smarter you are, the stronger the radio transmitter. The more beautiful you are, the uglier the mask, etc. And she had to apologize at once for her voice, which was a very unfair voice for a woman to use. Her voice was a warm, luminous, timeless melody. "Excuse me," she said, and she began again, making her voice sound absolutely uncompetitive. "Harrison Bergeron, age 14, she said in a grackle squawk, has just escaped from jail, where he was held on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. He is a genius and an athlete, is under-handicapped, and should be regarded as extremely dangerous." So she even has to change the sound of her voice to make it sound like an ugly bird's sound, a blackbird's harsh, unpleasant call, to mask the fact that her voice is naturally beautiful. A police photograph of Harrison Bergeron was flashed on the screen, upside down, then sideways, upside down again, then right side up. So even the person whose job it is to put the photo on the screen is incompetent. They can't do their job properly. Now you would ask, isn't this ridiculous? Yes, that's the point. And the government actually wants people who are stupid and incompetent to be in these positions of power so that they can control them more. It's all a big setup. The picture showed the full length of Harrison against a background calibrated in feet and inches. He was exactly 7 feet tall. The rest of Harrison's appearance was Halloween and hardware. Nobody had ever borne heavier handicaps. He had outgrown hindrances faster than the HG men could think them up. Instead of a little ear radio for a mental handicap, he wore a tremendous pair of headphones and spectacles with thick, wavy lenses. The spectacles were intended to make him not only half blind, but to give him wanging headaches besides. Scrap metal was hung all over him. Ordinarily, there was a certain symmetry, a military neatness to the handicaps issued to strong people, but Harrison looked like a walking junkyard. In the race of life, Harrison carried 300 pounds. And to offset his good looks, the HG men required that he wear at all times a red rubber ball for a nose, keep his eyebrows shaved off, and cover his even white teeth with black caps at snaggletooth random. So we don't need to belabor the point, but of course this whole description is totally ridiculous, right? It's comical, and it's silly on purpose, which we're going to get to. Why is that comical and silly going on? Think also that, the government has interrupted the regular news programming, and so who has control of the rate of the TV? It's under government control. And they're making an official announcement on this station, which they control. "If you see this boy," said the ballerina, "do not, I repeat, do not try to reason with him." There was a shriek of a door being torn from its hinges. Screams and barking cries of consternation came from the television set. The photograph of Harrison Bergeron on the screen jumped again and again as though dancing to the tune of an earthquake. George Bergeron correctly identified the earthquake, and well he might have, for many was the time his own home had danced to the same crashing tune. "My God," said George, "that must be Harrison." The realization was blasted from his mind instantly by the sound of an automobile collision in his head. When George could open his eyes again, the photograph of Harrison was gone. A living, breathing Harrison filled the screen. Clanking, clownish, and huge, Harrison stood in the center of the studio. The knob of the uprooted studio door was still in his hand. Ballerinas, technicians, musicians, and announcers cowered on their knees before him, expecting to die. "I am the Emperor," cried Harrison. "Do you hear? I am the Emperor. Everybody must do what I say at once." He stamped his foot, and the studio shook. "Even as I stand here," he bellowed, "crippled, hobbled, sickened, I am a greater ruler than any man who ever lived. Now watch me become what I can become." Harrison tore the straps of his handicap harness like wet tissue paper, tore straps guaranteed to support 500 pounds. Harrison's scrap iron handicaps crashed to the floor. Harrison thrust his thumbs under the bar of the padlock that secured his head harness. The bar snapped like celery. Harrison smashed his headphones and spectacles against the wall. So obviously, this super strength is total exaggeration. No one is physically that strong. Okay, so using this hyperbolic kind of exaggeration again for the effect. Why? What is this? It's the passion or the degree of protest against the unfairness of the total equality handicaps. So his super strong, powerful voice and physical ripping doors off their hinges and stuff, it represents and matches to the degree of protest. Okay? It's versus the degree of oppression that he was under. He flung away his rubber ball nose, revealed a man who would have awed Thor, the god of thunder. "I shall now select my empress," he said, looking down on the cowering people. "Let the first woman who dares rise to her feet claim her mate and her throne." A moment passed, and then a ballerina arose, swaying like a willow. Harrison plucked the mental handicap from her ear, snapped off her physical handicaps with marvelous delicacy. Last of all, he removed her mask. She was blindingly beautiful. "Now," said Harrison, taking her hand, "shall we show the people the meaning of the word dance?" "Music!" he commanded. The musicians scrambled back into their chairs. Harrison stripped them of their handicaps too. "Play your best," he told them, "and I'll make you barons and dukes and earls." The musicians began. It was normal at first, cheap, silly, false, but Harrison snatched 2 musicians from their chairs, waved them like batons as he sang the music as he wanted it played. He slammed them back into their chairs. The music began and was much improved. So even the musicians are playing terribly on purpose. He makes them play better. Harrison and his empress listened to the music for a while, listening gravely as though synchronizing their heartbeats with it. They shifted their weights to their toes. Harrison placed his big hands on the girl's tiny waist, letting her sense the weightlessness that would soon be hers. And then in an explosion of joy and grace into the air they sprang. Not only were the laws of the land abandoned, but the law of gravity and the law of motion as well. So notice they transcend laws. They go above these laws, and he's breaking the laws of the land. But this is, that's supposed to be like a little thing pointing there. This is, hyperbolic. They can't really jump as high as they say they're going to jump. And we'll talk about the actual importance of the dance, the importance of art as a form of resistance. And we'll have one more video to finish it, the rest of it off.